The panelists, and obviously we will continue our live debate after.
Your invitation to this Greek Public Policy Forum, the third forum in Chania. Congratulations to the initiative and all the best for the continuation. Of course, I will speak in my capacity as a politician, not an economist, a politician with a speciality, somebody who is representing maybe the economic biggest, largest and most important member state on one hand, but feeling very much as a Greek, so also representing, if you wish, the crisis country of the Eurozone #1. This leads me to certain ideas I had during the last 2 years, and you should know that I represent the FDP. The FDP is a co-ruling party in Germany with a vice chancellor who at the same time is the Minister of Economics. That didn't have a clear line, and to be quite clear from the beginning, I disagreed with the line of my party. And I'm not so sure whether you can see my presentation that I have prepared for you.
Your presentation is on the projector.
My talk will be why Europe needs more intercultural understanding and why Hellas or Greece or Greek values, Hellenic ancient values, could be the answer. And again, it's a politician's point of view, a politician who was in between the north, Germany, and the south, Greece, during the last 2 years. I have listed for you on the next slide some basic quotes of politicians of the north and the south. 3 quotes of Mrs. Angela Merkel, representing the, if you wish, the set of values that guide northern politicians, or politicians from AAA countries in the north, and Mario Monti and Mariano Rajoy, representing the South. Mrs. Merkel said in June 2012, in a meeting of my group, of the group of the FDP in Berlin, as long as I live, there will be no Eurobonds. I think she was herself quite surprised having said that, but it was a very clear message. She said in May 2011, we cannot have one currency, and one gets a lot of holidays, and the other very little. She made this statement at the party congress of her CDU at a time where maybe she was aware that those in Europe who have most holidays are the Germans and not the Greeks. And then she said in May 2012, no economic growth should be based on debt. So that's the clear line. Austerity, a term which in German, Sparpolitik, has a very good vibration, a very good sound, whereas austerity in the Anglo-Saxon world, or austerité in the French world, and especially in the Mediterranean world, sounds hard and negative. In Germany, Sparpolitik, Hypocrita, is the German word for the Greek word for Sparpolitik, has a good sound. Now, on the contrary, Mr. Monti in June said, I believe we will have Eurobonds in one form or another. However, it must be clear in our minds that issuing Eurobonds is not a license to spend and burden others. So there's an understanding for the north, but there's a clear different approach. Mr. Rajoy went even further and said in September, very recently, 2012, a monetary union cannot function if certain countries have to finance negative interest rates while others have to spend unsustainably high interest rates. So you see, and I pass to the next slide, that the euro crisis has also to do with a clash of different values, whereas the North puts pride, stability at all costs in the forefront, especially Germany. Mind you, Germany, the Bundesbank was the only country saying no to Mr. Draghi's new approach, whereas the North wants sustainable budgets representing a good economy, a balanced economy. The North, again, is investing in exports and especially in competitiveness, and focuses very much on it. And of course, entrepreneurial liberty. The South, on the other side, wants stability of the society at all costs. The South, and this is a very generalized view, wants a welfare state, although the welfare state in some northern countries works much better than in southern countries. One wants to invest in consumption and the public sector, and especially on social justice. Now, how to put this together? How to bring both approaches together? The German Chancellor, Mrs. Merkel, came up with a solution out of the crisis when she invented or co-invented the so-called Fiscal Treaty. On the next slide, I have the Fiscal Treaty in a nutshell. It was adopted by the 25 member states, not 27, so 27 minus especially Great Britain. The member states, according to the EC, would demonstrate the willingness of the member states to enshrine the very culture of financial stability in their legislation, mirroring the EU fiscal rules at national level. So Mrs. Merkel managed to pass a very fundamental approach of a northern country, the financial stability, into something which could evolve to, if you wish, a constitution of this fiscal union. And that's a great achievement. She was celebrated in Germany especially for that. Next, very important point, if a country does not properly implement the new budget rules in national law and fails to comply with the European Court of Justice ruling that requires it to do so, the ECJ, the Court of Justice, can impose financial sanctions. This sounds not Catholic and not Orthodox, but quite Calvinist or Protestant, because the sanctions will not follow in a future life or after your death, but within your life. That's a very Protestant approach, and it was enshrined in that fiscal treaty, which is currently in the process of ratification by member states. Now, passing to the next slide, is this going to help? Are we surviving with this fiscal treaty? My clear answer is the treaty as such does not help. We had a stability pact in the past, which, to be honest, was broken first by the Germans and the French in 2003, when especially France, but also Germany, did not reach the 60% and the 3% target. I think we have to reflect the very different kind of mindsets that Northerners and Southerners have. And the borderline is between Germany and France, because France would represent, always represented the South, would represent in this fiscal union also a Southern approach. I would like to make this clearer with a traffic light example. If a German would see a traffic light that is on red as a pedestrian, even if it's 11 o'clock at night, he would stop, and he would, as a pedestrian, not dare to walk over the street, because the red traffic is a rule, and this rule, if the state religion, you have to stand still. A French, like an Italian, like a Spaniard, like a Greek, would see the red traffic light as a point of reference, a guideline. So you have a look at the red traffic light, you have a look at the street is empty, no cars coming, you pass the street. You can see with this example that there is a clear difference in how rules are seen, rules are accepted. And let me say with the next slide that both approaches have very, very positive aspects. Both are right. If you take the German or the northern approach, clear rules give, of course, stability. Clear rules allow a long-term planning. That's what especially Germans and Finnish people love. Clear rules allow to react always in the right way. But on the other hand, the Mediterranean are right, because strict rules can be too unflexible. Long-term planning has always to be adjusted. That's what we see in the Euro crisis especially. And sometimes the right way has to be left to stay on course. How to synthesize the two approaches? It's absolutely clear that Europe has a debt problem. In 2011, the total debt of the Eurozone was 8.3 billion euro. The German debt is 2.1 billion, Greek debt 154 billion. The ECB has bought government bonds totaling, that's what we know, to 200 billion, but the ECB can only play a limited role. That's the way it is at the moment. So we all have a big debt crisis, and yes, Germany economically is in a better status, but in fact their debt is slightly higher than the Italian debt, and it's also on a very, very high cost. The Greek debt in general is only 3% of the total debt of the Eurozone. Now, what is the role, what is the way out, and what could be the role of Greek ancient values? What is the role of the Hellas factor, as I call it, because Hellas once provided the cultural basis for Europe. In the classic area, in the Roman Empire, Byzantium, later on also in the Ottoman Empire, the Western world is influenced by Hellenic values. And if we want to get out of this debt crisis, that is not a Greek crisis, that it's a worldwide crisis, but the Europeans at the moment struggle more than anybody else, Hellas or Hellenic values must be reinvented, and they could help Europe. Hellenic values could constitute the blueprint for a rescue scheme for Europe. What do I mean? What are the Hellenic values? I have listed 5 only, and I will elaborate on one of these 5. Self-sufficiency as one paramount value of importance, a real sense of community, the old polis thinking. Of course, freedom. The first free society on earth was the Athenian, the society of Attica. Then the sense of duty, and a last value I would like to mention here is happiness as life's purpose. Now, let me elaborate a little bit more on self-sufficiency on the next slide. Many Greek philosophers have made some references to self-sufficiency. Aristotle put it quite simple in keeping the right measure, pan metron ariston. Epictet said you should not exaggerate your demands. That's exactly what we did not. We exaggerated the last, especially 10 years, when we look at the Greek economy, the Spanish economy, the Italian economy, with a very, very low interest rate and cheap money. Next point by Epicure, self-sufficiency is a valuable commodity. Make the best out of what you have and be happy with that. That was Epicure's, Simberas, Epicure's idea about that. He also said the fruit of self-sufficiency is freedom. If you expect less and if you have less, then you are more free. And self-sufficiency will bring sustainable budgets. It seems and it sounds that we kick ourselves back into the agricultural era, but this is not what is meant. What is meant is that we take this very old value and try to implement it in everyday life, in our constitutions, in the European Union, Fiscal Union's constitution. How could it work? A vision for is back budget and Sherlock, in that, do you see budgeted and a balanced budget based on a new sense, and that's the Greek idea, of self-sufficiency. The state should serve the people to enable their life chances. It does not hand out favors to interest groups. Unfortunately, if you have a look at the European Union, especially at the member states or the members of the Eurozone who struggle with the crisis, it's exactly that what they did, especially Greece, hampered normal Greek citizens to explore fully their life chances, but favored some interest groups. And this we have to turn around exactly this mechanism. And this also gives power to the people, because there's a new sense of community serving, and when we look at the new growth parameter happiness, which is taken on board in some Western communities, France is actually discussing about happiness growth parameter, or as an important parameter. This could help in Germany. How could this work in a fiscal cooperation, in the fiscal integration? The first and most important thing I have to mention here, as we lived the crisis at the front, new Cold between Germany and Greece, is respect. We did not see respect from German side when it came to the Greek crisis. On the other hand, we can feel little respect for the Germans when you ask a simple Greek citizen how he feels about it. So we have lost the respect for each other, and if this is the case, the fiscal union cannot work. We never had such enormous negative result when it comes to statistical data on the European integration support. People do support Europe much less than ever before. For the first time last week, the Bertelsmann Foundation in Germany has found that a majority, not a big majority, but a majority in Germany is against the euro, is against the European integration. The same we can see in Spain, in Italy, which was classically #1 country in supporting the European idea, but also in Greece, in Ireland, in all the member states. Lucky us, the elections in the Netherlands went into another direction, but that's another cup of tea. And we should also recognize that the European public here is a reality, with goods and bads. I can tell you that I realized this when I made this summer in a Greek TV a statement about my party president, about Mr. Rösler, who harmed the Greek case to a high extent. So I was asked on Greek TV about him, and I said what I felt. I said, I feel ashamed for my party president. And 3 hours later, I found this statement in the biggest German news website, Der Spiegel, translated into German. I'm a politician, and I was happy to see that the European public sphere, to a certain extent, worked. Because this example shows you that one is looking at each other, but one is still not respecting each other. So that is why the next important aspect is we shouldn't talk about others, we should dialogue with them. In Germany, there was talk about Greece for 2 years, very negative talk, but no talk with the Greeks, no talk with the Greek government. There are reasons for that, I can't elaborate on that now, but this doesn't work. From the moment that Mr. Samaras went to Berlin and talked to Mrs. Merkel, things changed dramatically. Mrs. Merkel herself has now a new view, which has not only to do with Mr. Samaras' visit, but Mr. Samaras' visit was the point of return So we can reach up. We have that the German percent right, and not the Greeks are 100% wrong, but we have to compare the rights and wrongs and to be open to each other. But what can be done concretely? The European Commission, who had in the past to monitor the Stability Pact or the implementation of cohesion policy or regional policy in Europe, did fail. The European did fall, especially with 3%. The Commission is too soft and too weak and has not the power and not the courage to go against member states. That's why concept let the Commission provide. So they has to implement the respective committees of budget control or budget of the national parliaments. And I don't mean that Germans should control Greece. I mean that groups of member states of the Eurozone should control each other. That would mean that Spaniards, Irish and Dutch could control the budget efforts in Greece, but Greeks, Italians and Germans could control budget efforts together in France. So it should mutual control shared with a lot of people. Everybody can check everybody's cards, and not one single nation like the Germans can impose measures like Mrs. Merkel did on Greece. That's at least how people perceived it, and if you check it, it is like it was. This would also ensure the democratic legitimacy, because the European Commission has a certain legitimacy, but definitely less than national parliamentarians. I don't say all this because I am a parliamentarian. I know that a lot of my colleagues maybe in the past did not get involved as much as they should, but would they have this role, they would definitely change also their approach and try to learn to become Europeans within the fiscal union. One important thing is that the rules have to be clearly applicable, that's to say simple, but there should be enough scope for adjustment. There should be room for maneuver. The Dutch approach or the German approach, black is black and white is white, would definitely not fit. There should be a gray zone with certain limits and with rules. Let me finish with the golden rule for fiscal integration in this sense that you can read with Epicurus. The law that corresponds to human nature is a mutual contract that takes into account that we should not harm each other and should not allow ourselves to be harmed. I think having this in mind, the member states of the Eurozone within a fiscal union could easily come to a mutual understanding. At the moment, this is definitely not the case, and this finishes my short intervention. Thank you very much.
Mr. Hatzimagaki, thank you very much. I think we have time for two questions.
Can you just say your name so that because I just know?
Hi, I'm Jordi Becker, Director of CIDOP in Barcelona, think tank. And I'm...
Mr. Hatzimagaki, can you hear the... Hello? Κύριε Χατζημαρκάκη, μας ακούτε?
Τώρα σας ακούω.
Would you mind coming here?
Αλλά τώρα δεν σας ακούω.
Ναι, τώρα 2 λεπτά θα έρθω από εδώ πέρα να κάνει την ερώτηση.
Hi, I'm Jordi Becker, Director of CIDOP, think tank in Barcelona. I was surprised that that you chose to build so much of your presentation on stereotypes, and I wonder if it's not more useful to actually abandon stereotypes and just build from somewhere different. these contrasts between South and North that you made at the beginning, for example, are, I think, very difficult to, I mean, they correspond to the self-image that some people in the North have of themselves, but not necessarily to, for example, economic performance of these countries in the Maastricht rules of the European Monetary Union. So would it not be better if we discuss and leave aside the stereotypes which do not correspond to monetary policies?
And before you answer to that question, please, there is a second question from Professor Gustavo Pigel. Would you mind?
Okay.
Good afternoon. I was surprised by the statement that you had that the European Commission is too soft, too weak. To me, the landscape of Europe has changed dramatically in the past 10 years, with a European Commission that is particularly strong and a European Parliament that is too soft and too weak. I give you just 3 examples of the lack of presence of the European Parliament and how the European Parliament lack of presence has made things in Europe more difficult. The European Parliament, as far as I know, has not made the European Central Bank accountable in the face of the decision to withhold information on the Greek transaction with Goldman Sachs. The European Parliament has approved a law that would institute new European banking authorities, which saw basically the Parliament excluded from the governing council. The European Parliament right now is watching from the side the creation of a new European banking authority in the hands of the European central banks, where the European Central Bank has participated itself to the meeting to create this new European authority. And the absence of the European Parliament, or the lack of requests of accountability of the new structures that were built in Europe, to me strikes me as an incredible absence. I remember when I voted for the first time for the European Parliament, everybody was excited in my country. It was a big moment. Now everybody doesn't care about voting about the European Parliament, and I wonder if maybe the lack of presence of the European Parliament in the whole debate is not one reason for this. Thank you.
Thank you for the question. Mr. Echemakagi, if you can please answer the question.
Yeah, the first question was about the stereotypes, whether or not we should take them into account. I myself, I was really surprised to what extent stereotypes influence the political decision-making process, especially in Germany. I didn't expect that. It was very clear from the very beginning that in Germany somebody was searched for to be the one to blame for. And Greece was a very, very easy victim, a very weak victim, with all the necessary details the victim needs. But the Germans overdid it. The Germans, in their public debate, especially center-right media, center-right politicians, overdid it in a way that led to the effect that this summer, last summer, or the summer we live, many German tourists in Crete, where I'm from, did not pay their bills in hotels or in restaurants because they said, listen, Mrs. Merkel paid already. So there was no understanding for what was going on in Europe, in the European crisis. No understanding that the Germans, unless the haircut that hit the HRE bank, did not pay a single cent for the Greeks, gave some guarantees, but in return received enormous amounts of interest rates, like 400 million euros so far from Athens, transferred to Berlin. So all these stereotypes, unfortunately, were used by media, but especially by politicians, in order to win some percentage in the gallops. But this was not the case. They didn't win. FDP I represent remained below the 5% hurdle, although they used to materialize the stereotypes, but it didn't work. That's one of the reasons why Mrs. Merkel made a turnaround and now has a totally new view on what will happen. I might come back to that. But I would like to answer on the weaknesses of the European Commission compared with the weaknesses of the European Parliament. Traditionally, the European Parliament and the European Commission partners don't have right of initiative. We cannot initiate ourselves as a Parliament important legislation. We have to wait for the Commission to come up with initiatives. And that explains why we are not that much hurt. We can stop something, we can change something, we cannot initiate. But nevertheless, we pushed the European Commission to come up with the so-called pact, on the so-called two-pack, on the European semester. And I have to tell you that it was the Council, it was the Member States, that tried to go against it. So our weakness is that we don't have this right of initiative, but we never asked for it because we don't want that the Council or the Member States get the right of initiative. So that brings the Commission to a very decisive role. And that is what I wanted to say to you. The Commission squeezed like the hamburger between the bread in a hamburger, squeezed in between the Parliament that was pushing and the Member States that were going against this pro-European push, did not do the right thing, did not monitor, and that was my main critiques. The monitoring aspect is very, very, very weak. I myself, I experienced to be the main rapporteur, or if you wish, the responsible person for the discharge of the Commission expenses last year. And so I had for 1 year to check on behalf of the budget authority of the European Union, which is the European Parliament, to check all the expenditure of the European Commission. I have to tell you that the European Commission, although they have the full responsibility also for the expenditure within the Member States, via regional funds, via agricultural funds, refrain from taking responsibility for wrongdoings in the Member States, although by the law they have it. And it took me a lot of talks, a lot of fight, a lot of threats in order to change some elements only. For instance, to have the signature of the Commissioner under the expenditure of his portfolio, and I still don't have it. So there's a lot to change, there's a lot to say, but what I can say definitely is that the Member States don't fear the Commission. And of course, this was broken by France and Germany when 2003 they broke the Maastricht criteria and they hampered the Commission from sending them the respective letter. From this moment on, the credibility of the European Stability Pact was gone, but the Commission never ever argued and worked in a way that could fix this broken image. Let me put it very, very simple. Mr. Barroso is not Mr. Delors. Jacques Delors had a different angle from which he was tackling the Member State than Mr. Barroso. Mr. Barroso is too anxious, is too scared, is too much looking at what Paris, what Berlin, what Madrid and Rome are saying. And if you act like this, you can't be a strong Commission. I hope that the next Commission will be headed by somebody who is stronger and clearer in his visions.
Thank you very much for your reply. We keep Skype.
I can't hear you at the moment.
Can you hear me now? May I go down? May I go down? Okay, unfortunately it seems that there is another problem with the connection. Με ακούτε?
Ωραία. Για έλα από εδώ να πεις.
Τώρα με ακούτε? Can you hear us now?
Τώρα μας ακούτε.
Άρη, θέλεις καλύτερα να πάρεις τηλέφωνο να του πεις να μην ασχοληθούμε με το φτιάξουμε και να προχωράμε μεταξύ του όφωνη.
Ωραία. Να το πω να περιμένουμε, δηλαδή θα το ξανακαλέσουμε ή όχι.
Θα καλέσουμε για να κάνει και ένα ακούει.
Αυτό σημαίνει όμως ότι θα παρουσιάσει τα κείμενα από εκεί.
Ναι, ναι. Εντάξει. Can we move on to the next speaker, who is Mr. Epinos Apouleas, Chairman of the National Banking and Law and Finance University of London.
I would like to my part to thank the organizers for the invitation and this result. Also, I have two statements to make. Indeed, to follow up from the previous presentation, indeed the South is different. As a result, my presentation starts an hour later than it was scheduled. And all of us were very, very happy, apart from the Germans, when Italy defeated Germany in the Euro 2012. So after these extremely important and full of content statements, I'd like to move on and explain what this presentation is all about. First of all, I was really surprised to see how much what I came prepared to say here fitted with what Gustavo said, what John Stevens said, what David Sossi said, and of course two colleagues from Spain, Bernardo Valenzuela and Jordi Fares. Indeed, cultural differences were a reason, but they were not the main reason. Here we have a tragic tale of fundamental misconceptions, which not only have threatened European integration, but democracy itself in some parts of Europe. First of all, we have not one crisis, but four interlocking crises which feed each other continually. We have a banking crisis as a result of what happened in world markets in 2008, but not only. We have a competitiveness crisis. European competitiveness is being eroded continually on the basis of labor costs of the euro, but not only. Also, Europe is losing out on investment in research and development and innovation, as well as antiquated cultures do not really foster entrepreneurialism, which is the bloodline of 21st century economy. We have, as a result of the competitiveness crisis, a massive payment imbalance. We have a massive payment imbalance. We have massive payment imbalances, which create budget crisis within the European Union. And because most of the trade is intra-union, the imbalances are mostly internal. And of course, all these, with the exception of Greece and Italy, has finally translated into a sovereign debt crisis. How do they connect? Well, Irish debt to GDP before the crisis was shrinking and was standing at 21%. Right now it's 111. Why? Because the banks had to be bailed out. Of course banks have to be bailed out when they are systemically important. But I'm not sure Anglo-Irish, for instance, was systemically important for the Irish banking system. Having said that, I'm sure Anglo-Irish was extremely important for the British banking system and the German banking system, because it had borrowed enormous amounts of money from those banks. It's getting worse. Banks were loaded with sovereign bonds. So a sovereign crisis fed into a banking crisis, the banking crisis fed into a sovereign crisis. Banks in Europe have serious problems with their liquidity. I'll explain that in a minute. As a result, nobody lends money to them. Why nobody lends money to them? Because they think their loan book is crap. So if people think that your loan book is crap, and because there are massive information asymmetries in the banking sector, they assume that if they lend you money, they will lose their money. So they do not lend you money, and as a result, banks, which their main job is provision to the economy and maturity transformation, to lend money out to the economy. And even if you recapitalize them, unless the credit markets open, the credit lines open to them, there's going to be no credit expansion in Europe. And in an environment of low growth, you have a simple superimposed austerity packages which are doing no more than tightening the knots around the neck of the European economies, especially those of the South. I just explained how the banking sector has contributed to the crisis. Nobody is lending to European banks. Why nobody is lending to the European banks? Because nobody trusts the asset book of the European banks. Why nobody trusts the asset book of the European banks? Because the European banks were not properly structured and recapitalized. Why the European banks were not properly structured and recapitalized is what goes around comes around. And surpluses are being recycled. So yes, whose surplus is the debt of the European banks and the European nations? I'll give you a minute to figure it out, and I'll return to that. So, massive contingent fiscal liability, because the market is anticipating further bailouts, and actual fiscal liability, because as a matter of fact, Ireland, Cyprus, Greece, and Spain are in the process of bailing out their banks. And of course, without great expansion in the economy like the European economy that is based on mostly on bank financing, means the chances of growth are extremely slim, because don't forget, this is not the United States. There's no Silicon Valley. You're not going to get any Zuckerman or Bill Gates who will get a big idea and then find venture capitalists back in. Okay, there are not Steve Jobs in Europe, in the same way that there are not Condoleezza Rice or Obamas in Europe. Our culture is rigid, sclerotic, and antiquated. So as a result, our economies are extremely dependent on bank finance. And I'm just explaining what happens to bank finance. Now, austerity. How does austerity contribute to this alleged sovereign debt crisis? I exclude Greece and Italy because these are countries that really have actual sovereign debt problems. And I will explain why they had those. So this is the standard formula in economics that explains when a country's debt goes up or down. The most important factor here is the rate of growth. If your rate of growth is higher than the interest rate that you are paying and then in deficit, guess what? Your debt to GDP ratio is shrinking. If you're running a deficit, yet the debt to GDP ratio is shrinking. The reason that Italy is in the state that it is that for many reasons. Its growth rate was very weak during the decade. Most of the Italian debt is long-term, unlike the Greek debt, that is short-term, no less as a matter of the intervention of a speaker who graced us with his presence this morning, whom I wanted to ask about the particulars of the refinancing of the Greek debt. But in any case, that's for a different day and a different fight for me. So, austerity means that the debt to GDP ratio is ballooning as the GDP is shrinking. And what are the institutions to pick up to absorb the shocks? Why we don't have them? Haven't we learned that when we have shocks, we should have institutions in place to mop the problems? Well, as a matter of fact, we have the European Union with no central debt issuance facility. There are no fiscal transfers, even though even the United Kingdom is a monetary union. Manchester or Edinburgh should have different currencies on the basis of their competitiveness, much undervalued compared to the lira, if the Chancellor was not sending money that was receiving by the taxpayers in London and Southern England to finance the NHS in Manchester or in Scotland. The ECB had no mandate to act as a central banker to nations, and strong elements of a banking integration without unified bank supervision, without any fiscal burden sharing arrangements in the event of bank rescues. Hence, the Irish taxpayer had to bail out Anglo-Irish in order for the British taxpayer not to have to bail out Barclays Bank or RBS, in order not to mention the German banks. And of course, no European scheme guaranteeing deposits, even though if there was such a scheme, all based on guarantees, there would have been no flight of deposits from Greece, Italy, Spain, and so on. And by the way, and this is not patriotic at all, I do not regard myself as a big patriot. The biggest hemorrhage is the one we observe in the Spanish banking system, not the Greek banking system. As a matter of fact, and that's a massive difference. In Greece, what we had was wholesale lenders voting with their feet. In Spain and Italy, it's mostly retail depositors who have led the banks. Perhaps Greek retail depositors were less sophisticated, or they didn't know English or German or to open bank accounts abroad. I don't know what's the reason, or perhaps the Italian elite is more patriotic than the Greek elite. But what we have right now, and you can see the balance sheet of the ECB, which has taken out claims against Greece because Greek debt is not being accepted any longer as collateral by ECB, and ECB is not financing Greek banks any longer. It's the Central Bank of Greece that is doing that through something that's called ELA, which is Emergency Liquidity Assistance. So if you see the balance sheet of ECB, you will see that around 350 to 400 billion have fled Spanish banks and around 150 to 200 Italian banks, which means for sure wholesale depositors are staying put with Italian banks. And if you had a deposit insurance scheme, probably you would have rescued an European deposit insurance scheme. You would have rescued Spanish and Italian banks from the hemorrhage of retail deposits that we observe right now. So why on institutions? Everybody here has assumed political experience and unwillingness. Is that all? No, it's not. There are also certain conveniences, ideological conveniences, attached to that unwillingness to build institutions. Throughout the 90s and the 2000s, until the crisis, economic policy was dictated by a number of assumptions. One of them was that financial markets are efficient and they can absorb shocks either by prices or through market discipline, which would reflect on market prices and interest rates. Then price stability runs paramount. If we control inflation, we have the economy under control without thinking about asset bubbles. Then, okay, the euro is not an optimal currency area, but if we have factor mobility, it will look more like an optimal currency area. And guess what? Current account imbalances matter for Indonesia, Korea, Thailand, but they do not matter for a member of the currency union because there's going to be no run on the currency. Right? Wrong. All of those were disastrous intellectual fallacies. Financial markets are, even if they are momentarily efficient, are prone to crisis. Some, like Mishkin, like Professor Minsky, not Mishkin, that's a different person, like the late Professor Minsky, believe that financial markets are inherently unstable. Others, like the late Professor Kittelberger or myself, believe that financial markets can be damagingly unstable when you have a new knowledge breakthrough. The dot-coms, ratings, financial innovation. All these are knowledge or technology breakthroughs, which the markets do not know how to price, because they have no prior pricing experience for the new product, the product of the new knowledge. So financial markets are prone to crisis. Market discipline can easily break down because of herding, panics, fads, irrational exuberance, and there is no market discipline when it comes to big banks because everybody assumes that the government will bail them out, the deposits are in any case insured, so why should you care how expensive is credit that you provide the banks until you stop giving the money altogether, that is, or why, as a shareholder, you should exercise any kind of monitoring, the bank will be paid out in any case. Now, that was the first fallacy. The second was that the price stability was everything. As a matter of fact, it was not, because it created asset bubbles all over the place. Just before the crisis, we had a bubble in real estate, a bubble in commodities, a bubble in food, and a bubble in financial instruments. It can work. Interest rates can work to control prices in a closed market, but they cannot do the same in open global markets when Chinese or Indian or Brazilian surpluses have to be invested somewhere. Now, optimal currency areas. Are there any? Is the United States an optimal currency area? Is Canada an optimal currency area? Let me tell you something. The Minister of Finance of Canada a few months ago told me for 20 years, Ontario, that's the area around Toronto, the residents of Ontario, the taxpayers of Ontario, were complaining that they were subsidizing those dope smokers in British Columbia. And why not to push British Columbia out of the Union? Now the 2000s come, Chinese money pours into British Columbia, which is permanently into a serious fiscal surplus for various reasons that have also to do with the recession in the United States and the proximity of Ontario to the American markets. Ontario goes into recession, and guess who's keeping the Canadian Treasury afloat? The dope smokers from British Columbia. Because that's how monetary union works, through fiscal transfers. And then, current account imbalances matter even within a currency union, because you can have a confidence run in the banks of that member state and the bonds of that member state, since you don't have a common debt market. Even though you will not have a run on the currency itself. And even so, obvious things. Why, since the beginning, it was all about Greece, which as I will say in a minute, that unfortunately I'm missing a few slides, was off table, but was also the perfect victim. In order to continue on this path of disaster. As a matter of fact, it's exactly what I'm discussing. Smithers. So who is the elephant in the room? The elephant in the room is the European banking system, which is proportionally to GDP. Not the GDP of the Eurozone, but of the member states, much higher than the US banking system. The reason for that is that European banks are much more global, and also the main source of financing in Europe, the main source of business finance, household finance, individual credit, that's consumer credit in Europe, is banks. Whereas at least when it comes to business finance, in the United States, the biggest source of finance is the capital markets. Because there is a strong tradition of raising money through the securities market or the private equity market, the venture capitalists. Then, it's not just everybody's banks. What goes around comes around. Where do you think German savers' money are? German savers' money were lent to Spanish banks, and they are those empty villages in the Spanish coastas, entire ghost towns. Has anybody told them? Markakis is not online to ask. How about the consumer credit boom in Latvia? Hungary. What do you think caused that? Transfers by the hard saved, a hard working German saver. So that's the elephant in the room. But that doesn't explain it. Greece failed because the democratic institutions of the country failed. A client state fostering lawlessness. Guess what? Ireland failed because the government was very close to the bankers. I'm sorry. For political reasons. The governing party was very close to the bankers. The same way that for political reasons, civil government is very close to the church, and the church is the main shareholder of the funds. In order not to mention foreign policy issues. So governance matters. Greece was a systematically corrupt country, but it's not the only one in Europe. Greece has a capitalized economy, but I'm sure my Italian colleagues will understand what a capitalized economy looks like if we ask them. There was a grand-scale looting in the Greek state, but Greece is not the only country in Europe where grand-scale looting has taken place. And as for the power of vested interests, well, they are very powerful in Greece, but so are they in Ireland, Austria, Italy, and so on. And corruption is one thing that the influence of the interest grows. You also have an issue of effectiveness. The Greek and the Italian states cannot collect their taxes, but they are in the same union with the Austrians, who are very law-abiding people, or the Spaniards, when it comes to tax collection. So these are systematic governance failures for which the monetary union made no provision. So, is ECB intervention enough? And in any case, are we going to have a fiscal union, a banking union, will these measures resolve the issues? No, they will not, because the 2.5%. You want to borrow more? Fine, pay 10%, that's national. Extremely effective way to impose fiscal discipline without strangulating entire nations. European deposit insurance, a way to formally restructure sovereign debt in the European Union, and I had a series of slides here on why the restructuring of the Greek debt proved such a complicated story, but I don't want to steal Rodrigo's thunder, so I will leave that for Rodrigo. Since growth is everything, in order to shrink public debt in the European Union, we've got to invest in innovation and free enterprise, which also requires cultural change. And traditionally in history, you've had three ways to eliminate debt. Inflate it, we are trying it, but it's not enough. This is what Draghi is doing right now. He's trying to inflate debt, but if he overdoes it, we are going to have much higher levels of inflation that we currently encounter. So the ECB's mandate for price stability will be defeated, and that will open the Pandora's box. So war, inflating debt. The third way is debt forgiveness. Perhaps a combination of manipulating current prices for sovereign debt, plus, instead of privatizing them, or just privatizing them, utilizing state assets, creating a European sovereign wealth fund that would be backed by sovereign assets and will buy at fire sale prices European countries' debt and cancel it out, is a good way and a market-based way to look at debt forgiveness without the German taxpayers being up in arms. And finally, governance matters. This is a union between democratic states with much different levels of public sector development, public sector effectiveness, and development of their political accountability and democratic structures. I explained why Greece failed. Greece failed because the democratic institutions failed. As a result, I think we should pay much more attention to governance convergence, for which, an issue for which, for instance, the Troika has done absolutely nothing in Greece, and measure the quality of institutions. Is that everything? No, but it's probably all the founding stones that we need is in order to start building a true currency union. Thank you very much.
Would you like to ask any questions, or would you like to proceed to the last presentation and then you can ask questions to both speakers? So we do it like that? Okay, so the next speaker is Argentinian, who faces the same problems, also the threefold barriers, expert in sovereign debt.
Hello, good afternoon. Thank you, the organizers, for inviting me and giving this opportunity. Today I'm going to present about building on the Greek situation and see where we are and where we can move forward. And in this particular aspect, I'm delighted that Emilio's and I did not overlap at all, because that was one of my fears. And basically, Emilio's clearly identified the causes. What were the causes of the current situation? And I'm going to focus a little bit more on identifying some specific areas and then, to a certain extent, trying to propose a solution to them. I saw that Gustavo was looking at the background image. That was what caught your attention?
Fantastic. And apparently Gregor is also a fantastic story.
Well, probably Emilio is familiar with that, but I have to tell you that I have the privilege of owning this bond. Actually, I own two of these bonds. Have you ever heard of Poyet? Have you ever heard of Poyet? They're sovereign that issued debt.
Tell the story.
In the 1820s, there was this Scotsman, Gregor MacGregor, who one day appeared in the city of London and hired an underwriter. He introduced himself, he brought all the seals saying that I am Gregor MacGregor, and here it is. You can
Sovereign prince of
sovereign prince of the state of Poyet and the dependencies, cacique of the Poyet nation. And he goes on. He holds many titles. Then you say that you in Greece invented everything. Probably not this particular scam. Poyet is a country that never existed. He hired the underwriter, he issued bonds, he paid, based on what he raised from that first issuance, he paid a couple of coupons until he had the chance to come back again for a second issuance. He also started selling title to the land in Poyet and said, we need doctors, we need lawyers, we need people to go and colonize Poyet. So the people that were buying these titles of land were also buying a ticket on a boat hired by Gregor MacGregor. And coincidentally, in that boat, there were big trunks full of money, new Poyet money that had just been printed in the UK. So basically, many of these people were exchanging their sterling for Poyet currency. So if you look at this, it's perfect. It closes a full circle. Of course, navigation at that time was not the same as it was today. One of the two boats never reached Poyet, the other one reached. It was a jungle. When they put one step on the land, there were Indians throwing arrows at them. So until the story was known, it took some years. Remember that at that time we didn't have neither fax nor email, so it was something, things were quite different. Gregor MacGregor then took this camp to Paris, and then he finished his days fighting for the army of Simón Bolívar in Latin America. It is a fascinating story. So let me tell you what I'm here. I'm here to present a problem. I'm basically to set the tone. I think that if I just give you some quotes, you will understand what we are talking about. Basically, it started in February 2010. The Spanish Minister of Finance saying Spain is not Greece. Shortly after, The Economist, Portugal is not Greece. Then the Irish Finance Minister saying Ireland is not in Greek territory. So apparently nobody wanted to be Greece. But here comes the cavalry. Papa Constantino saying Greece is not Ireland. And then Elena Salgado again, who seems to be very Bermoraji, Spain is neither Ireland nor Portugal. Then Angel Correa, Secretary General of the OECD, neither Spain nor Portugal is Ireland. So nobody wants to be moved. Wait, don't get carried on, there's more to come. But then here where we drop the standard. Spain is not Uganda. That's Mariano Rajoy, Spanish Prime Minister. Then Fitch rating says Italy is not Spain. And the last two are the ones that I like the most. Nicolas Sarkozy, a great statesman, when the second bailout of Greece has been agreed, he said, today the problem is over. And if that was not enough, a page in the financial crisis is turning. So this kind of sets the tone for what I see as this is the problem. This is what we are dealing with. It is a monster of many heads. We are not dealing, and that's something that I think in the earlier presentations today, we are not dealing just with one crisis. We are dealing with multiple crises. It is of a legal nature, of an economic nature, of a financial nature, of a political nature, and of a social nature. This makes the problem even more difficult to solve. And for us, we are trying to solve it. This, we can see this as a beauty, but that's why it's so complex, that's why it's so difficult, that's why some of the answers are not enough, some of the answers cannot solve the problem, and that also explains why many times there are decisions that are taken that do not seem to be rational, either on the political level or the economic level or the legal level. And that's precisely why we are dealing with a monster of many heads. For instance, the fact that we are bailing Greece out for a second time, and now we are in the discussion whether there should be a third bailout. Well, that makes sense, but probably from an economic point of view, from a legal point of view, it will not make sense. But probably it makes sense because we need to make the whole banking system resilient. We need to gain time, or probably because it's simply as there are elections in some of the EU countries. But having set the ground of what I understand as the main problem, this is what I'm here to talk to you about. It's about whether Greece is entering a Sisyphus myth cycle. I assume that you are familiar with the Sisyphus myth, that basically in Greek mythology, Sisyphus was a king that was punished to carry a roll over a boulder up a hill to watch the moment that he gets up to the top of the hill, see it rolling back and having to repeat this action forever. So this is my question. When we are faced with Greece, aren't we being faced with a Sisyphus myth, and isn't this becoming kind of a cycle? And how can we stop this cycle? How can we cut this? And basically, the things I would like to address are a few of them, just a few comments, some macro bullet points on the situation and why I think that it's so difficult if we try to solve this right now, but I'm not saying it's impossible. What I'm saying is there are challenges ahead, but there are some fundamental questions that we have not much to answer in the last 10 years or 20 years, and now we are out of the sudden want to solve them from night to the morning, and on top of that, the answer needs to be found out as a result of a meeting of 27 heads of state plus ECB plus IMF, each one of them having their own agenda, each one of them having different interests. I personally think it would be very difficult. So basically, one of the key issues, or one of the main points that I'm concerned about is deep financing. Deep financing is an acronym for debtor in possession financing. That's how in the US they refer to when you receive financial aid while you are still in debt. So basically what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to just summarize with one or an acronym and a word that's very on Greek. Basically receiving financial assistance while they are still in debt. So basically deep financing. Deep financing is helpful to a certain extent, but basically the essence of deep financing is the counter side of that is priority. The issue of priorities, and that's, I would put it in different terms, I would put the issue of the resisted priorities at the EU level in the sense that, yes, we are happy to grant financial assistance, but as long as I am acknowledged some degree of priority. That, so far, at the international level, has been the role of the IMF, acting as the international lender of last resort, who holds a de facto priority. It's not written anywhere, it's not written on any official document, but everybody knows, understands, and acknowledges that the IMF has a de facto priority. However, at the EU level, we were faced with two episodes. ECB in the PSI, where they were excluded, and there was a lot of discussion whether that was what should have happened, whether that was legal or not, whether that should be challenged in a court of law. And now we're starting to see, no, we saw a press release saying that there will be a change of policy. Now we will run pari passu. What is pari passu? Nobody knows. Emilio is the last one because he understands the complexity of pari passu. In the sovereign context, nobody knows what pari passu is. Because pari passu is a concept from corporate insolvency, not sovereign insolvency. I've been privileged to see a forthcoming book of, I would say, roughly 150 pages where they interview all key practitioners in New York and in London to see whether they have a common understanding of pari passu. There's no single agreement over the book of 150 pages. And also, Papadaki went to a conference that they organized in London in June, and he was puzzled how lawyers could spend one entire hour discussing pari passu to get to the conclusion there's no meaning of pari passu, or there's no one single meaning of pari passu. So basically, at the EU level, we have the ECB with exchange offer with Greece. That was the first issue, and the second one is ESM. ESM, if you go to the treaty, to recital 13, but you say, but the recital is not part of the treaty. Yeah, but that's for those of you that are not lawyers. For us lawyers, recitals come as much as any clause of the treaty. There's recital 13 that says the IMF has super priority, first time ever in history that it is writtenly acknowledged that the IMF has super priority, and then we have priority, although subordinated to the IMF. So these are the two issues where we are acknowledging that, okay, the counter side of financial assistance is priority. But this is resistant. So at some point we need to make peace with this. Either make peace with this or change the whole system. And this change the whole system, I see it slightly difficult because this goes against the whole rationale of mortgages. That basically I got collateral because that's the only reason why I will pay you, or that's the only reason why I will pay you at a lower rate. Otherwise I will lend you only at market rates. And second important element here is that there has been a lot of official lending, way beyond usual standards, or way beyond what used to be, I would say, in the 90s, in the 80s, and this is creating a crowding out effect. What is happening here is that private sector is being segregated or kind of taken out of the picture, and now it's official. And when we are dealing with official, then we are faced with another problem. I would say probably a bigger problem, which is we cannot restructure official debt, or so far that's the official line, unless we see that someone pulls a rabbit out of a hat. Official sector debt cannot be restructured. Why? Because then here brings into the whole issue of moral hazard. The $1 million question is, are we going to see something new in the Greek case? All this official financing comes with conditionality. If we bear in mind conditionality, we are concerned about moral hazard, about restructuring, and then on top of that, we have some news wires, like I'm going to come back to this slide, but just to give you an idea of what was happening on the day that there was a Greek election. Tsipras said Greek results make bailout accord null and void. We were talking earlier today about the rule of law. Tsipras said Greeks have voted against barbaric bailout. Tsipras said won't join a government of national salvation for long. Tsipras said Greeks have ended plans for additional austerity. Tsipras said Venizelos Samaras to renegade pledges in writing. Greece, Tsipras says wants international commission to investigate Greek debt is illegal, whether it is legal. And Tsipras says must be a moratorium on Greek debt payments. So basically, this opened the whole issue of the rule of law. This opened the whole issue of respecting the sanctity of contracts. This also questions the whole issue of we live in a global community where we have reached agreement, where we have international organizations that provide assistance or help or aid, or usually over a weekend when the country is in flames, like it was here yesterday. Now, they receive a call and say, guys, I need you to put measures in place by Monday. Of course, there are issues of transportation. Basically, it's like bringing a group of astronauts into Greece to set up new policies that need to be implemented on Monday, and that needs to be flawless. Of course, it cannot happen because many times it's learning in the process. But what I'm saying is, if on top of that, then you have people that will start questioning. Remember that these people, in theory, are the guardians of taxpayers' money. Your money, my money, which is being used to help countries regain sustainability. Then, on the other issue of that Emilio briefly touched upon whether we should have an SDRM or an EU SDRM, so far the EU approach has been exactly the opposite, moving apart from that. Why? Because they have basically EFSF, and EFSF mainly, and ESM kind of taking on board the rationale of EFSF have been so far public market initiative. Basically something very simple, to a certain extent, structured finance. I borrow cheaply based on my AAA rating, and I lend cheaply. Why? Because you cannot borrow cheaply, so I borrow on your behalf. The EFSF is an SA, as a Nottingham incorporated in Luxembourg by the 17 Euro area member states. This is ideal. This is fascinating. I am a great believer in capitalism, and I embrace structural finance. I love structural finance blindly. But the problem is, it's good as long as it is used to solve short-term liquidity issues, but not if what we try to resolve by means of structural finance is structural reforms, long-term measures that need to be adopted in the country. And this is where we come back into rational versus irrational, and that's why I have to take you back to the monster with different heads. That's why some of the measures that have been adopted are not that rational from an economic, legal, political, etc. If we do a separate analysis point of view, because probably we are so far gaining time to make the banking system more resilient. A question here would be, and this is something that we discussed with Hugo Panizo when we were writing a paper a couple of years ago, whether are we trying to avoid the unavoidable? That's an answer that probably Nikita will ask me once I finish my presentation, like he has been asking in the morning to the first couple of presenters. thank God that he forgot, but basically, are we trying to avoid the unavoidable? And this links immediately to what's the role of DSA, debt sustainability analysis. Basically, are we going to reach 120.5% debt to GDP ratio in 220? Basically, debt sustainability analysis, and here again I will try to make light defense of the IMF. Here I would like to differentiate between the IMF board and the IMF economists. And basically, let me start in a different way. I will start with a quote that Mark Twain immortalized, which is, there are three types of lies: damn lies, and statistics. So, the point I'm trying to make with this is that debt sustainability analysis, I personally think that it works, and it can work well. However, I think that there might be some cases, and I'm not implying anyone in particular, to not necessarily think that I'm referring to Greece, but probably it was the board decision of the IMF that we need to make it sustainable. So basically, justify. So basically what? Yes, Greece will be sustainable with 120.5% by 220. So now, to beef it up, come up with the argument. So, my concern is that Greece has amassed a lot of debt. Greece, I'm trying to be oversimplistic because I need to wrap up. I only have 10 to 15 minutes. I need to deal with a multitude of different heads. I cannot address political, economic, social, legal, financial issues. But basically, being oversimplistic, what I'm trying to I'm concerned that Greece might be entering what is known, or what was well known in the 80s as a debt trap. I'm borrowing so I can keep on servicing interest. And then I need to borrow more to keep on paying more interest. And then debt keeps on piling up. This is one concern. The second concern is, are we going to reach 120.5% by 2020? I have a clear view that that's impossible. On top of that, is 120.5 sustainable for Greece? Another question mark. If you want, I can tell you off the record. There's no But anyway, so basically, guys, here is that shouldn't we start thinking about a way for? Yes, Elia, don't worry. I'm thinking of putting something forward. Is there a solution? There are two options. Either someone puts a rabbit out of a hat, which happened, for example, in Iraq, when Iraq was dead in 2003. Basically, what they did, they created like an ad hoc SDRM. They passed a UN resolution. And by means of this UN resolution, they kind of shielded all the assets of Iraq. So basically, there would be no litigation. They allowed Iraq to default on external obligations. Because basically, this UN resolution was then translated into domestic legislation, either in the US or at the EU level. So basically, Ecuador would not be able to sue and attach on Iraqi assets. So, in the case of Greece, what I'm thinking more is of, okay, that's a tool that we now have in the toolbox. Why don't we come up with something different, like a new type of official lending? A type of official lending which would be either contingent, basically depending on repayment based on performance, or on more concessional terms, whereby in the event that you have received official assistance, you have abided by the terms and conditions imposed in conditionality, then we can open a new chapter as to whether Greece has abided by the conditionality imposed, which again I have a clear view, which I assume you will share with me. But should we create something, a new type of lending instrument for those cases where official lending has been provided, conditionality has been followed strictly, and that has failed, where you can receive a second bailout whereby will allow you to regain sustainability, and that's something that probably is food for thought. That's something that I wanted to use more like as a springboard. And then, since I've been asked to try to end as much as possible on a happy note, and also, since we are in a hotel, I would like to promote tourism, so particularly tourism. This touches upon what we were discussing earlier today in the morning in the presentation. I said, okay, I don't want to bring in Argentina already, but it's inevitable. It's kind of an elephant in the room. But basically, Argentina has been, is, and will be an international disaster. Argentina is a serial defaulter. Argentina is a serial defaulter. As I said this morning, it's not a term that I have coined. But Argentina defaulted in 1982, Falkland War. 1992, implemented the Brady Plan. Defaulted in December 2001, technically happened due to the grace period in 2002. So we have cycles of 10 years. They would ask me, 2012. No, don't get overexcited, because that default of 2002 was referred in 2005, and a second bid or 25% more in 2009 or 10. Now I'm getting lost. So basically, we still have some few years until the next Argentine default. Is it going to happen? If you read any Argentine newspaper today, or if you are familiar with the Argentine economy and the measures they are adopting, probably I would say yes, and probably we will shorten the cycle of 10 years. Going back to Greece. Greece is a completely different scenario. Greece has the support of the EU. I am a great believer in the EU as a project. However, I am not a great believer of EU politicians. So far they have been kicking the can down the road. They haven't managed to achieve anything. Or probably they have achieved a lot for their own personal agendas, or a lot to gain time to protect the whole financial system. But Greece has a golden opportunity. I personally think that they already used their silver bullet by retrofitting cash and doing the restructuring. So the $1 million question is whether Greece will be able to make a change for good. That's why I'm very candid. That's why I'm very explicit. That's why I'm very blunt, and I share my Argentine experience because I've seen it. And I do not want Greece to become another serial defaulter. Just to conclude, while I was doing my research for this presentation, I came across this picture, and just to finish, I will try to get your help. I'm not sure whether it's Draghi or Merkel when they were a kid, but I'm just trying to find out. Probably you have some indication about water, etc. I'm not sure whether it's Draghi or Merkel, but I think that with that, I would like to conclude. I will leave it there. As I've been asked, I think that this would be helpful to ignite that debate. I give the microphone back to the chair.
Thank you very much for this exciting experience. Actually, for market practitioners, pari passu for the traders means that if there is a problem, you rank at the same level for payments to the rest of the people that have invested on the money. And they thought that that's a very simple thing. But unfortunately, the traders never read prospectus or the returns. And that's the reality, and that's why on this table we prefer to cover some market practitioners with academics, because believe me, most of the people that participate in trading, they never read prospectus. Questions?
I don't like technical solutions, but I think that Rodrigo is touching on an important issue, which is the GDP index bonds, meaning payments that come out only if the economy is performing well.
Guess what? They said just that.
They issue them?
Absolutely, after the PSI.
Okay, but
One of the coupon of the extraction bond.
okay, but what I'm talking about right now is the European plan.
Yeah, no, that's a warrant linked to the new issue bond.
Coupons linked to the new bond.
Yeah, here I'm talking about a European plan, where basically you would, as Greeks, pay only if the economy picks up, which has the typical insurance advantages that you're paying when your finances are good, which is good, and you're not paying when your finances are bad. But it has an additional political advantage in this case. All these plans are based on austerity, right? It's not that I'm going to give you money and that's all. It's based on austerity. So it's based on the presumption that I know better what is going to create growth in your country. So basically Europe is telling Greece and other countries, you do this plan because I know it's going to generate growth. A lot of people like me don't believe in it. So I think it would be at least fair that Europe puts a cheat